Did you know Zimbabwe had to become a colony twice just to get its independence? Also, it is the only country in history that went back to being a British colony for a few weeks in January 1980, just so it could finally be free. Well, most people think Zimbabwe's independence journey was a straight line from 1890 to 1980, but from December 1979 to April 1980, the country did not exist. And during that period, the country was in a strange limbo where the war had officially ended. Independence had yet to happen. Britain had returned to be the colonial authority to a country that had technically been independent from British rule since 1965, and Zimbabwe Rhodesia technically no longer existed, while Zimbabwe had yet to be born. At that time, people were living in a country that had a name nobody recognized, a government that no longer ruled, and laws that were about to be erased. Welcome to This Week in Zimbabwean History. This is the story of how Zimbabwe got independent twice. To understand how Zimbabwe got independent twice, we have to go back to November 1965. During that time, then Prime Minister Ian Smith declared the unilateral Declaration of Independence where Rhodesia ceased to be a British colony but became a white minority government. As such, Rhodesia became a de facto independent state, which however was not internationally recognized. For the next 14 years, Rhodesia would be considered a rebellious colony and would be placed under UN sanctions while functioning as an independent nation. This would lead to 14 years of war between the Rhodesian whites and the guerrillas who were fighting for black majority rule. By December 1979, though, the war was at a stalemate. Neither side seemed to be winning, but by then the Lancaster House Agreement had been signed. But as neither side could come to power without an election being held, a bizarre decision was made. Smith's Rhodesia had to be deleted, but the British Empire had to come back and lead its former colony again. As such, the independent state of Zimbabwe Rhodesia vanished, and legally, the country reverted back to being the British Crown colony of Southern Rhodesia. By the first week of January 1980, there were Rhodesian soldiers and Zanla and Zipra forces in the same country, but none had control. The man Britain then put in control was Lord Christopher Soames, the British governor, and from December 1979 to April 1980, he was at the helm of a country that was in a legal twilight zone. And with his appointment, the British flag, the Union Jack, was rehoisted and flying high in the country. And perhaps the most dangerous moment for this fragile government was the ceasefire deadline of January 4th, 1980. By midnight, over 18,000 guerrilla fighters had to emerge from the bush and report at different assembly points around the country. If they did not make it by the deadline, they would be declared illegal outlaws and the war would resume. And so thousands of armed men who had been hunted by the Rhodesian Air Force for years had to trust that walking into a camp monitored by a few British soldiers was not a trap. And as the world around celebrated New Year, Zimbabwe held its breath. One nervous soldier, one accidental shot, and the dream for a new Zimbabwe would be shattered. Yet by the end of January 1980, the stage was set. The recolonization had served its purpose. Election campaigns had begun in earnest, and exiles were returning. And the colony was dying so the country could leave. So Zimbabwe didn't just get independence on April 18th, 1980. It had to survive a high-stakes December to April, which allowed the country to turn back into a colony before it could finally free itself from white minority rule. So when we look back at independence in 1980, we are not only looking at the 18th of April, we are looking at the restraint exhibited by the thousands of soldiers who gave themselves up at assembly points, and we are looking back to the time where a country voluntarily walked back into the past, accepted a remnant of colonialism just so it could secure its future. And this brings us to the end of this week in Zimbabwean history. Did you know about this? Or even better, do you remember this period? If yes, please let us know what your experiences were in the comments below. But in the meantime, please do like and share and comment and subscribe. For now, goodbye until the next one.